Hello, friends, and welcome back. We are now on chapter 308, which is a weird spot to come back to, but I thought I might as well start the discussion while I am well, not really while I'm in the mood, but while I have the opportunity to do so. So I might as well do it now rather than just waiting on a longer time. But before all of that, just a bit of housekeeping. Thank you to Muddle and is it Mohan Doobie? You can correct me later on. But thank you for participating in the last discussion. Thank you for also Mohan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thank you for the heads up about the manhua adaptation. I don't really read that much manhua, so this would have completely flown under my radar, the adaptation at least, if you had not let me know about it. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's get into the discussion. So after the arc with Evelyn, or somewhere around after that time, we get this scene of two mysterious figures inside this carriage, and they're discussing about Zeke and his group's actions that seem to have thrown many wrenches in their plans. And as they're discussing this, upon my first reading of the novel, I had thought that Glen was the mastermind behind all the mysterious robed figures. However, this conversation kind of enlightened me as to how the group actually functions, because Glenn doesn't really seem to be the mastermind behind like all of the happenings, as these two figures don't really seem to put any respect on his name, as they just refer to him as the hero wannabe. And aside from that, they don't really mention him in any other way. So I'm just here left thinking that these figures, they're probably in a working relationship with Glenn, but if the way that they refer to him is to be an indicator of how their relationship works, it seems to be that Glenn is just really some dude who just has the ability to regress, and these two people, they have their own plans, but they're making use of him, is what I'm kind of going at or getting right now. Tell me what you guys think. But yeah, that's my game theory as of now as to who these guys are. And in terms of the mysterious pronoun person who they only refer to as him or them, I have completely no idea what the hell he's about, because apparently they have knowledge about all the regressions, all the world's history, and the only person who has knowledge equivalent to this person is Lila, who they refer to as the core for whatever reason. So a lot of speculation can be thrown here. Honestly, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm just here for the ride, and the ride is good right now. Moving on from these two people in their little carriage, we move on to Leona, her mini arc with her tribe's sacred relic. And I thought this arc, it was alright. Golden Castle dude was an okay villain, but this arc really wasn't anything superb. I thought it was alright. Not to say that this arc is bad, because, well, maybe, in comparison to the arcs that immediately come after, which kind of overshadow this kind of filler arc, honestly. Moving on to when we arrive at the elf village, I really like this rendition or the author's rendition of elves, where elves aren't really these people who just overly value nature, grass, leaves, and will protect a tree's leaves with their lives. Elves in this world are rather just people who are more observant of their surroundings, the earth, and what provides them sustenance. And when it comes time for these elves to cut down trees because they have to expand, they don't hesitate to, which I find this to be an interesting rendition of elves. And it is also for this reason that I do wish that we were able to get more world building in terms of the elves, since all we really got from this arc was just Zeke walking into the village, not really meeting anybody, but getting weird stares from elves in the outer village. Afterwards, just meeting Leona's family and going full force into a war. Because of this, we really didn't get much world building in terms of the elves. I definitely understand why this was skimmed over, because that's not what this novel is about. I'm just saying it would have been interesting to see it. In terms of the conclusion of this arc, I really liked what the author did here with Leona's character, turning her from, well, a pretty naive elf when we first met her to a still pretty naive elf, but someone who's more aware of how cold or how cruel the world around her is. And I can't help but compare Zeke Brave's Leona with our current Zeke's Leona, who is much more, well, not much more mature, but just more aware of how the world works, as compared to Zeke Brave's Leona, who is still just acting like a child and just throwing temper tantrums. I can't help but be an English teacher and overanalyze this, because right now, where in previous carnations of the world, it might have called for Zeke Brave, who was much more heroic, who was much more, I guess the whole theme was much more lighthearted. Now this reincarnation, or just this version of the world, calls for a much more grimmer, more serious, more mature party that is able to handle more mature topics. In terms of the next arc with the kidnapping of lovers, I don't really have much to say once again. Aside from the fact that Glen is literally a certified groomer, this motherfucker. Every time he's just in the novel, I just can't wait for Zeke to punch him in the face and just knock his teeth out. When he got into a scuffle with Zeke in the first introduction of the arc, that was like up there, one of the most cathartic things that has happened in this novel, because Glen is just a horrible person. His character is like a whole can of worms that would probably be a video of its own, because, well, just to get into it briefly, maybe Glen wasn't a horrible person at the start, right? Maybe he was just trying to copy Zeke if Zeke was originally a hero. Maybe Zeke was someone Glen looked up to and wanted to aspire to be like, but he finds out that he can't really be as intelligent, as talented, or as gifted as Zeke. So he, rather than trying to go about the path of a hero like Zeke in a genuine way, he decides to, well, fake all of his achievements and just turn Zeke and all of his comrades, teammates, friends, whatever, into villains who he overcomes, quote unquote. I don't think any of this rambling or guessing about Glen's past holds any weight, but I think we can all just agree on the fact that Glen is a horrible person and he deserves to get his teeth kicked out if, well, not if, because it's basically practically already confirmed that Glen is a horrible person who inflicts trauma on people so that he can either kill them to be seen as a hero, or he can, quote unquote, save them from the trauma that he himself commits so that people view him as their savior and owe their lives to him, and ultimately end up joining his party in order to fulfill the ultimate goal of killing Zeke, who is also probably another victim of Glen's, well, I hesitate to say master plan, because Glen isn't really a mastermind. But yeah, Zeke and many others are victims of Glen, who is, from what we know, someone who wants to cosplay as a hero and is willing to go back in time and just inflict horrible trauma onto people so that he can play this role. Moving on from Glen, though, and on the topic of Laura, I really feel bad for Laura because she just gets ditched by Glen in the tunnel while they're chasing Condal, because Glen is just throwing this temper tantrum because Laura, who has trained her whole entire life to use the sword, is not throwing the sword away in order to pick up the shield that Glen judges to be a lot better. As a result of this, Laura almost dies if it were not for Zeke's intervention, which ultimately ends up saving her life. In the previous video, where I ran into a dilemma as to whether or not Zeke actually cared for his subordinates or not, and or whether if he just kept them because it was much more convenient for him, I think this difference, or this scene in which Glen abandons Laura, kind of answers that question for me, because here we actually see an example of what a careless, or not really careless, but someone who doesn't care about their subordinates, how they would actually act as can be seen with what Glen did to Laura. He just put her in harm's way and didn't really think about it. Whereas Zeke never really does any of that. All of his actions, all of his seemingly careless acts have thought behind them, whether it be calculated thoughts as to whether or not his subordinates can survive whatever he's going to put them through, or if it's thoughts as to how it will benefit them. There's always a thought behind his actions, and he never does things carelessly. Furthermore, Zeke is someone who highly values freedom, and he is helping in every way that he can so that Snock and Hans can achieve their dreams. With all of that having been said, I'm officially convinced of my headcanon that Zeke actually cares for his subordinates and is a caring person, much more than he gives himself credit for. With all of that having been said, this arc comes to a close in terms of closing thoughts, statements. I thoroughly enjoyed this arc for what it was. I appreciated the scenes with Elena and Snock, which I thought were pretty cute, as well as the scenes with Zeke and Lila going on a date, which I thought was pretty comedic. I also appreciated Evelyn and Dracul Mihawk coming back, as I didn't want them to just be like one-off characters. And I hope that this is a trend in the future, I guess, with prior characters coming back and being relevant rather than just being given the wuxia treatment of just being one-off characters who never appear again as the characters just ascend into higher realms. Other than that, who could also forget Condal? Rest in peace, that poor man, because Zeke did not go easy on him. He probably got a worse death than the Bellid Cardinal, and I don't say this lightly because Zeke also obliterated that guy, but what Condal went through, I mean, he did some horrible stuff, but I think he got what he deserved and maybe probably more. I am unsure as to if any of the stuff I said in this review or discussion made sense at all, if it's just a compilation of random ramblings, but that remains to be seen. I'm still enjoying my time with this novel, and I look forward to looking back on my past speculations as to whether or not if they're correct, and if they're not, I mean, I'll have a good laugh at whatever crazy ramblings I was saying. But yeah, I hope I see you guys in the next discussion, or in this discussion as well, and have a good read, guys.